Hello, everybody. Good evening. I hope you all remember that today is another edition of um, Siblings Perspective. Yeah, I see you. So, today's guest is here already. Just bringing him on. There we
Hi,
go.
Andy. How you doing?
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. How about you?
Good to see you. Hi,
Beautiful.
Tofumi. Hi, everyone. I'm just waiting a little bit longer, but I can just start introducing today's guest. So, full disclosure, I do know him. He's my nephew, so his family. But you all shouldn't go getting ideas that, yes, we do agree there's probably some kind of genetic component to all of this, but that's it. That's all. We don't have enough evidence to conclude. So no bright ideas just yet. So his name is Chiazam Nzeako. We've had his younger brother on. So what we try to do is get everybody's perspective because each person experiences the situation differently. So even though they're related, we still want to hear how it's affected him different from his younger brother. So so today we have Chiazam, and as usual, he will introduce himself, and then I'll probably have some leading questions, one or two, and I'll let him have the floor. And basically, he's going to tell us what his journey has been, his experience as having a brother who's got autism, who's autistic, who's on the spectrum, how, his journey through life. He's, um, so Chiazam, just introduce yourself and we'll take it from there.
Sounds good. So as my auntie has said, I'm Chiazam Nzeako. So my brother's been on this show slash podcast before as well. Um, Most likely due to our baby brother Shikelu. Hey Angie also. Um, yeah. So I guess the biggest thing that I want to start off talking about is I think it's something that people who don't have siblings who aren't on the autism spectrum or who don't have, some sort of IDD, they need to understand that it's all really about like understanding and compromise with like most things in life. Um, I can say that I haven't always been like the child who understood fully what was going on, but that's part of maturing, that's part of growing up in life. Like you learn to understand that not everybody is going through the same struggles and tribulations as yourself. And I don't know, I think what shows and podcasts like this do helps, you know, combat that kind of ignorance that some people just don't have, or some people do have.
Yeah. So that's so when you say ignorance, talk us through that. What's been your experience in terms of other people being ignorant of either the condition, or is it how to help, or what exactly?
I'd say it lies usually with, I guess, just like an understanding of what it actually is for to be somebody who has like, autism or an IDD. It's usually like just like not fully understanding like what it means and like how it kind of impacts that individual's life and the lives of their family members. So like the most basic example is like certain language is like just not going to be appropriate. Like I'm pretty sure all of us can understand, know which sort of words are just like not generally okay, especially around somebody who has one of those disabilities or somebody who has a family member who has one of those disabilities. And that's like the smallest one. And it goes up to even, bigger ideas where like teachers are looking down on a student because they have one of these disabilities, or a student is having a hard time transitioning to the workforce because of these disabilities. And there's no sort of real compromise or understanding about the things that they're enduring and the things that they're capable of doing. So I think that's like the ignorance takes many shapes and forms. Um, but you know,
Okay, so if we look at the aspects of teachers not understanding, okay, how to help, think about when you are much younger. I mean, like now you're in your 20s and your brother is a full-grown teenager approaching his 20s as well. So think about, step back to when you were much younger. Do you have any experiences around how teachers kind of related with kids and what you thought about it or what they could have done differently?
I think the biggest ones generally was just the things I didn't see necessarily. Because like obviously I was doing my own school stuff, but it was always like what we were hearing from our parents. You know, when we were all coming back, eating dinner together, and the stories we were hearing. The biggest ones probably would be like talking, my mom having to go every single time a teacher was like shortchanging my brother's education. Whether that be like literally not giving him the same assignments as the other students or giving him the same amount of time to do like a test as the other students, which like if you know anybody with any sort of like intellectual or developmental disability, you know that like they're going to need a little bit more time sometimes to like take on certain academic challenges. Um, and it was always a thing that my mom would have to go and explain that over and over and over again, sometimes to the same teachers repeatedly. So you know, there's also the flip side. Obviously, you have pairs who are essentially individuals who, you know, guide and navigate a student through a school system, but they can only do so much. Since obviously, the teacher's word is law in the classroom.
Mhm.
So I don't have any specific anecdotes, but
Yeah.
I those are my general thoughts on
Yeah.
that time of our lives.
I like that bit about the teachers because I don't quite think any of the siblings has touched on that. Maybe if I go back and think, but off the top of my head, I can't really think about any. So we have this situation where, especially when you think of the Nigerian or the African family context, where we all have to go to school and do all that, and we throw these children into an environment where I don't think the teachers are adequately equipped, or they don't even have a clue as to what's going on. So here is your mom being the advocate and fighting for your brother. I know you said there's nothing you can think of immediately, but if you think about your own learning, your own schooling, and sort of what your parents did, especially your mom, what do you think, what would you suggest would be something, not just from a parent's angle, now looking at it from a sibling's perspective, what can parents do for those children, and what do you think teachers should be offering more of?
Okay, so like for the first aspect of that question, more so like what parents can be doing. I'm obviously not a parent. I don't know the
I know.
gravity of having a child myself,
Hmm.
or taking care of a child myself. But as far as I can understand, I think the
Yeah.
biggest thing that these parents can do is generally just trying to give the child the same opportunities within reason that they give their other children, if they have any other neurotypical children. I
Yeah.
think the biggest thing is like, especially for academic opportunities, yes, it's going to take longer to sometimes take on certain challenges. That's part of what these disabilities are. Um, but it doesn't mean that these children, students can't overcome them. It's just that they need more time to do it, and that's not a bad thing. It's not ideal, maybe in some people's, you know, grand picture of how life shakes out, but
Hmm.
it's possible. And take my brother for example. He went from not being able of speaking to us and having like full conversations with us to him being the one to tell me like when we're going out and explaining like where our parents are and us having conversations about our shared interests. And it's so by a lot of, you know, standards that'd be considered a miracle. And
Hmm.
even though it's like wondrous, the reason it happened is because step by step my parents were all along the way giving him the same opportunities where, as you know, as they could, and giving him the additional help when needed, because that's also the key part. Is like
Awesome.
you can give him the same opportunities, but if you don't give him the same, you know, assistance and take the same level of care to make sure he gets the help he needs, it's all for naught, essentially.
Awesome. Awesome. So at what point did you really understand what it meant for your brother to be autistic or to be on the spectrum? You know, at what point in your life did you have a full understanding of that and kind of say to yourself, oh, it's okay for your parents to give him all this attention, assuming you weren't getting, you know, when you think about the proportion of attention for you, for your brother, and then for Chike, what, you know, at what stage?
I'd like to say that it was, as soon as he was born, but obviously I'm no perfect individual. It was probably closer to when I was like 11 or 12 when I kind of fully understood that like this is just something so beyond like what my parents or him are responsible for, that like it's at the end of the day they need to give him that, yeah, extra time to make sure that he has the same opportunities as me and my brother. And that was around the time actually I was gearing up to apply to high school
Mm-hmm.
and go off to Jamaica for high school. So when I was like really thinking about in like the grand scheme of things, like what was really important to me, the fact that like my parents would sometimes spend more time with like my brother's activities ended up being kind of the thing where I was like, like that makes sense though, because like for him to do the same activities that I want to do requires so much more effort on not only the part of like him, the individual himself, but my parents as well, because they have to essentially do a lot more of the legwork to get him involved in these activities than like they had to do for us, even for me applying to school.
Yeah.
So I think it was around that time where I started kind of realizing that like, oh, like there are differences between me and him, but those differences like are okay. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
that big of a deal.
Yeah. And then prior to then, you didn't kind of like feel and know like, oh, why is all the attention on him rather than me kind of situation?
I'm sure when I was like 6 or 7, when before my parents could fully explain to me what being on the autism spectrum was, I'm sure I had thoughts like that. I can't really remember that part of my life super well. Um, but I don't think I've ever thought that. I haven't thought about anything even remotely close to that
Mm-hmm.
since I was probably like 9 or 10. Like it's
Yeah.
been a long time
Long.
before I've had thoughts like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Awesome, awesome. So when you think about relationships, your friends, both genders, okay, how do they, have you sort of like spoken with them, talk them through what it means for your brother to be on the spectrum? Do they know, and how have they come to terms with that? How have they understood what it means to be on the spectrum?
Yeah, so I don't know. I have like, a fairly solid friend group. And all of them, for a lot of them at least, I've met my brother a few times. Between like high school friends, college age friends, everywhere in between. Um, and I think the biggest explanation was just that like, he can't necessarily communicate as like clearly as sometimes as like, you know, me and my friends can. Like if I say that I'm, you know, tired, I can express things like, hey, yeah, I'm just like really having a tough day. I'm really tired. Or when like I'm really happy, like I can just sit here and tell you I'm very happy, as opposed to like sometimes my brother like he has more of this, this physical expression of happiness. Like he likes to give hugs, like, and it's different for every kid, right? Like some kids do not like the physical contact, and some kids do, and that's how they express their emotions, and that's how they express what they're feeling. So I think it's just like kind of explaining that dichotomy has been like a big part of it, and I've never really had a problem with any of my friends. They've all treated Chike like he was their own little brother. Um, and I don't know, that makes me happy because I think, in my opinion, it shows that people are capable of understanding and treating these
Mm-hmm.
individuals who are on the spectrum and have IDDs as the same as any other human being. It's just a matter of, dispelling, some of the ignorance around it and dispelling some of like the misinformation around potentially like what is like it's like interacting with these sort of individuals.
Okay. So would you say the burden of spreading the or advocacy rests more on the parents and the siblings? Would you think?
I mean, it ends up being that way, obviously, because like who's going to be a bigger advocate for my brother than me,
Mm-hmm.
my other brother, or my parents? So of course it's going to end up being that way. It's wonderful when it's not the case, where there's somebody who has no like familial connection to a person with autism or an IDD, and they end up being a huge advocate. But that's not always going to be the case. So the burden does rest more so with
Yeah.
as family members, in my opinion.
Okay. So think about like the some of the social elements of things where um, he potentially could do something or say something that you're like, oh my gosh, not now. This is an embarrassing situation. Um, has that sort of like ever happened, and how have you had to deal with it, or how did you deal with it, if at all it has?
I mean, it definitely does happen. Like that's just, but like to be honest though, like as I've gotten older, I've kind of realized that like that's something that like whether somebody is on the spectrum, whether they have some sort of disability, whether there are neurotypicals, just like average Joe, people do embarrassing things. Like people will do things that embarrass you, no matter who they are or what sort of things that they are enduring and have to deal with. So as far as I'm concerned, I think as I've learned to get older, just like you don't need to take things as seriously as like some people may like you to. And it's like if something happens that's like really embarrassing you, you just take a deep breath and you're like, it's really not that serious. It's really not that big of a deal. And that's personally is how I've come to see it. I'm sure people have different ways they deal with it, but that's what's worked best for me, just not taking anything too seriously.
Yeah. I know. I mean, like, there could be, I mean, I know this situation where they would just blurt out things, sort of like, oh, somebody comes and
Pause.
yeah, I mean, yeah, it went what a bit, but you're back on it, fine. We're good. So, um, so when you think about for him, for instance, from your perspective, what do you think would be the sort of emotional support that he would need and he would require from your perspective? And as a sibling, how do you think you would handle it, or what can you do for him or any other sibling do in that context?
Um, I think the emotional support kind of boils down to like treating them. It's kind of similar, actually, funnily enough, to like the educational aspect that we were talking about earlier. I think it's a matter of like treating them the same as you would treat any other individual within reason. If you see like somebody getting stressed out and they're not, they clearly like their body language is closed off, you can tell that like I'd say it's not that hard, especially if you've been living with somebody for a very long time. If you learn to notice those sort of like signs that somebody's not comfortable,
Mm-hmm.
and you do the same thing you would do for I would do for like any of my other siblings or friends. Is just go up to them like, hey, it's okay. Try and get them to talk. If they don't want to talk, sometimes you just sit with them until they seem like they've calmed down a little bit, and then let them do what they need to do. And I think that's like the biggest thing as like, especially as like an older sibling that I can do is that I don't want to, you know, force him to feel a certain way at a certain time. So all I can do is be there for him when he wants me to be there and give him space when he wants space, which in my opinion boils down to how you interact like in
Mm-hmm.
comfort most people in life. Like you
Mm-hmm.
give them space when they need it and you're there for them when they need you. Simple as
Okay, so you don't, like, as an older brother, don't feel too protective of him, over him, like I have to be there all the time.
No, I don't feel like I have to be there all the time, but like he knows full and well that like if anything ever happens to him, I will be the first one there on the ground, making sure that there's hell to pay for anybody who's crossed him. Like that's what it boils down to, and that's like the same for every like sibling. Like
Yeah,
no one wants anything bad to happen to their sibling, especially as the oldest sibling. Like there's
yeah,
no way I want something bad to happen.
yeah. I kind of like to think about it, because what I tell parents and I tell people quite often is that we shouldn't just treat them differently, because it's so easy to focus on the condition and forget the human and every other thing about them. And then you start to attribute a lot of things to either the condition, or making excuses for them, or just not letting them thrive.
Yeah,
I know you kind of like touched a bit on different aspects, but do you have more to say around that? Just
yeah,
just let them, don't attribute everything to being autistic or whatever.
yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing to remember is that like just because somebody has some sort of like developmental intellectual disability, they're on the spectrum, whatever. they also have like personalities. Like it's not like somebody with autism is going to be the same for like, from my family versus somebody whose family is halfway across the world. Like there are different factors that play a role: home training, cultural aspects, exposure to any number of possible ideas and influences.
Mhm.
So I think it's kind of important to just take a step back and sometimes and think to yourself like, okay, is this a product of them being unable to meet a certain expectation that I have? Or is this just how they are? And if it's a problematic part of their personality, like, I don't know, like they get really aggressive, like when they get upset. That's the
Mhm.
sort of thing you work through. It's not, there are kids who are neurotypical who also get very angry and need to be like slowly taught how to, you know,
Mhm.
not behave like that. So I don't know. I think that's the biggest part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, cool. I like that. I like it. Just remembering that they are human,
Hmm.
not the thing, And so what's your fondest memory? You know, what does it like? What's the best memory that you've had? Making memories is, I think, really important with them. So, what kind of memories? Was best fun time, maybe?
I mean, I guess like if from our like childhood, it's more so like all me and my brothers. Like literally, this is a perfect example actually what we were just talking about. Us literally just like roughhousing like a bunch of like you know adolescent boys will do because he was interested always in like the Power Rangers, the action stuff. Me and my brothers like took martial arts when we were younger, so we'd come back from martial arts class and show Chike what we learned. And like he has this running skit with my younger brother that sometimes I'll just watch, sometimes I'll join in on. Um, that's essentially just breaks down to like a martial arts like skit
Session.
play kind of thing. Yeah, and it's funny. More recently, I'd say probably just us talking about our shared interests. So he's also really into anime. And for those who know me, they know that, like that's one of like my biggest hobbies. It
Hmm.
really is something that interests me, and he's like somehow over the years he's picked that up for me. And so like, nowadays like I'll recommend something to him, and it might take like a couple of months before he finally does it, but like he'll eventually watch the show and be like, oh, show was great. uh or he'll be like, I didn't like that as much as you told me I would, and I was like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's fair. And that's the point, like he's able to express himself better now, potentially also because we've given him other avenues to do so other than just like school.
Hmm.
That Something, because that's the trap. Like when you're only making them do school stuff out of some hope that you know, that
They get socials from school,
yeah,
and so it's important. What I'm hearing is not just about the outside world. It's important to involve them in whatever is going on at home as a
yeah,
family. Just have fun, build those relationships, the bond and
yeah,
everything. Okay,
yeah,
I'm just, one of the symptoms of, or one of the manifestations, or however presentations of autism is a repetitive behavior. So when it comes to repetitive responses, how have you had to deal with that, especially if you're just not in the frame of mind, or you feel this is not the time, man, just go, and you're like, so
yeah,
how have you had to work through that, and what can people do when they're in that sort of situation?
yeah. Um, I think it generally depends. Like in my situation, it was more so like I would sometimes just have to be patient and just like wait for him to get the words out, and eventually you get the words out. Sometimes when it was like really not the time for it, like when we were out and about, like we needed to make moves like on the fly, I'd be like, TJ, just take a deep breath, start over, and tell me what the thing is. And honestly, like after he did that, he was usually fine. He usually explained to me what needed to be explained, like without too much difficulty. But I also am understanding the fact that like for other individuals and other kids on the spectrum, that's not necessarily as easy said as done. Especially if they're nonverbal, like you sometimes need to have like you need to have a little bit more of that patience than the pushing them along
Mhm.
to take a deep breath and just keep going, because that's not necessarily always going to work for everybody. But as far as I was ever concerned, like sometimes you just need to give him the time to like sort his thoughts out, and sometimes it's just a matter of like take a deep breath, take it slowly, not in any rush. And as long as you don't like rush them like crazy,
Mhm.
usually you'll get an answer within a reasonable amount of time.
Okay. So what if he was engaging in something that you thought was not age appropriate. So, there's some people who maybe they're like in their late teens or early 20s, just young adults, and they're still playing or clinging on to things, objects and things that maybe a toddler or a younger child would be involved with, right? And I've met people whose hair they just stands on end and they're getting all their hackles up. So in that example, have you encountered that sort of situation, and how have you had to deal with it?
To be honest, I don't personally think it's my place to deal with it. Like, as far as I'm concerned, he's free to like whatever he likes. Yes, it would be ideal if he moved on from Power Rangers sometime in the next decade, sure. But like, is it going to really affect him in any like very serious way? No. Like, even if Chica's trying to make friends, or God help us one day, maybe finds like a girlfriend and subsequently a wife. Um, I I have to hope that she will like Chica for all the things that are a part of him, those interests being parts of it. But like I think it's important to remember that like kids on the spectrum, they develop more slowly, so that it'll take them more time to get over some of those interests that they have held since like they're super young. And who knows, maybe they'll never get over it, and that's okay. That's just a part of who they are as a person. Like, does it take anything away from them that they still like Power Rangers or Thomas the Train or like whatever it may be at whatever age they're at? Like it really doesn't matter. Like there are people who like those things and like the most silly things from their childhood. Even like Disney movies, there are grown adults who watch Disney movies and like swear by Disney like it's the Bible or something. So like and they're like these are neurotypical children doing this. I don't really feel like there's any need to push him into getting over any of his
Mhm.
interests before he's ready.
Exactly. And so so that point right there is sort of like where I tell people, and like you've said, is it harmful? No. Whose behavior is it really about me? Let's step back and see who is it really affecting me, because maybe I feel embarrassed about the situation or what's going on. Like you said, if it's not harmful for that individual, then just let it be. Just move on. Find something else. Don't beat yourself or beat the person up about
Yeah.
it. Just move on. We all have things that we haven't let go of if we come to think about it. Some adults
Yeah.
still suck their thumbs and
Yeah.
all sorts of funny things.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's lovely. That's lovely. Is there sort of any other concerns that you think the environment should be aware of when it comes to individuals on the spectrum? Kind of.
You mean like the learning environment or like their home environment? Like
No,
what?
the general public.
Okay. Um, I think the biggest thing kind of just boils down to like something that honestly we're not like human beings aren't really good at doing this even to you know to the neurotypical people who have no like things on the surface that are like very different about them, much less people who like have something that's like more substantially differentiating them from like every other person.
Mm-hmm,
But I think it's just like a sense of being kind to like your fellow man. It's not a hard thing to
mm-hmm,
do. It's as easy as just if somebody's looking lost, like you would stop and help, just be like, hey, you need help. I hope maybe I can point you in the right direction. Like I think that I saw this video actually my mom recently sent me of this kid on the spectrum being like viciously like physically attacked by like
oh
a
God.
group of teenagers. Um, and I saw that and like there's this in this video, it's a bunch of people with their phones out recording this, but not a single person stepped in to help. And to me, that just shows like a fact that we lack so much human kindness in the world that like it's sad. It's sad that like this kid who like probably had no idea what was going on, had no idea how he even got into that situation, and was just being wailed on essentially, had to just endure all of that while nobody stepped up to help him. And I think that's like that could that's a very big extreme, but we see a smaller instances of that in so many different day-to-day situations that I feel like the best thing people can do is just like try and be kind to somebody else. Like you don't know necessarily if somebody's on the spectrum just by looking at them, at least not all the time. But like just being kind to everybody as a general practice,
Yeah.
it doesn't really take that much out of your day. It doesn't really take anything away from you. And like it could be potentially the thing that like allows somebody to take the next step in their life or just keeps them safe during a critical moment. So I think that's the biggest thing. Like, the general public has to know one thing about people with special needs, the people on the spectrum, whatever we want to call it. Like, just be kind to them, just like you be kind to somebody else. If, yeah, that's about it.
Mhm. Yeah, that sort of it leads on to what I was going to ask next. Thinking about it when it comes to their safety. Okay, so how do we feel, or how do you feel about letting him go places on his own? Even if it's, I mean, to familiar places or where he's been to before, it's probably okay. But in order to enable him, in order to let these individuals flourish beyond the home, we actually want them to venture out a little bit. And then here we are thinking of their safety, especially because things like autism aren't written, they're not obvious,
Mm-hmm.
they are hidden disabilities, like we call them. So, how how does I know you've said about being kind, but what are some of the other concerns beyond bullying that you would like to speak to, if any? I mean,
Yeah.
there's, oh, go on.
No,
Yeah.
no, yeah. For more like tangible ones, like I guess this is good. It might sound silly, but just like trying to have as many practice scenarios as possible, and to, in my opinion, at least, like not coddling them, for lack of a better word, during those like practice scenarios. Perfect example, like I know kids on the spectrum who are scared to go down an escalator because like they don't like the fact that it's like moving and you're going from like walking yourself to like standing on the escalator, and that scares them. I can understand that. There was definitely a point in my life where I didn't like riding on escalators either because they're scary. I'm not trying to go head first down a flight of moving stairs. Um, but I think you have to learn at some point how to navigate them without being scared of them, because like when you're out in the real world, you're gonna find those everywhere. You're gonna have to ride them, and you can't hold up the people you and move you. So I think it's just
Yeah.
like when you're with those kids, letting them stand by themselves on those escalators, or if they have trouble walking on their own, actively being like, hey, like try to walk on your own because you're gonna have to do this when you're in college, when you're going to work, stuff like that. And like it doesn't have to be all the time. It's not like you have to constantly train the kid like it's in the military, but like
Mhm.
there need to be moments and times where you're practicing those skills, because there will be a point when me as a sibling or my parents won't be there necessarily to be holding his hand and helping him through, these instances. So he needs to practice so he's capable of doing that. In terms of like what I don't feel super comfortable with like my younger brother go to like places he's never been to before, just because like I don't think he'd be easily able to navigate them by himself. Um, but I don't know. That's like a more of an infrastructure thing to make them more friendly to like people to like who have
Mhm.
special needs. Like I don't think there's anything that like I can reasonably think of like right now that would fix all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think so in that regard, just thinking how can you all make the work or take the burden of parents, for instance, you're not at home presently, so it's just parents at home with him. But as they get older, as we the parents, we get older, we age, what would what would you guys want to do or see happen in that regard, rather than just shipping them off to maybe homes or facilities
Mm-hmm.
where perhaps you're not very comfortable with? What would you speak to that, the sort of fears that siblings have, or you from your perspective?
I, I don't know. I guess my biggest concern is that like you know we're lucky. Like I know that if like God forbid something were to somehow happen to literally every other member of our family, myself, my middle brother, and my two parents, if something would happen to all of us somehow, when we were all gone from this world, there would most likely be people there to take care of Chica. Like he'd be okay. Um, but there's always still that fear at the back of your mind that like you want to give him the skills to be able to take care of himself when the time comes, because just like how my parents want me to be able to stand on my own 2 feet, I have that same hope for Chike one day. It's hard. It's a hard thing to accomplish, even for like a neurotypical kid to be able to stand on their own 2 feet. And anybody who says otherwise is not telling the truth. But I think the best things you can do is like little steps at a time, learning, teaching him over the course of a week how to fold his own clothes, teaching him over the course of a week how to put dishes away and pull them back out again, and like being careful when doing that.
Yeah.
And just taking these little steps by steps and being consistent with having them like constantly be used to learning because I
Hmm.
think being okay with constant learning is A, just a good skill for life in general, no matter who you are.
Yeah.
And B is something that like they're really always gonna have to be doing. The world's always changing. And as long as they're used to like constantly like learning and getting
Hmm.
used to change, it makes things a lot easier when they're on their own without necessarily that support all the time.
Okay. So basically, don't let the fear of the unknown or the fear of the future cripple you right now. Live
Yeah.
in the moment. Doesn't mean that you don't have those worries or those concerns,
Hmm.
but just make the best of the moment, right?
Yeah, I'd say so, yes.
Lovely. So I don't like saying parting comments or words. Do you have like any other thing that you would like to speak to or touch upon that I haven't prompted you to say? Just feel free. Go right.
Um, I say it's just really reiterating that like being kind to other people thing. Like I still think that like most like not most, but a lot of problems in the world can be boiled down to the fact that like sometimes people are just intrinsically mean to each other, or even worse, they're intrinsically apathetic to others. Um, and that could be concerning because like apathy is sometimes even worse than straight up being mean to somebody because that means that it feels like you have no one who cares about you.
Hmm.
Just taking an interest at least in like what's happening to the people around you, I think is important, especially for these kids because otherwise like sometimes they fall through the cracks of like the infrastructure that is in place in wherever place that somebody lives. Um, and it's a job of the family to kind of prepare somebody and prepare their kid to navigate those cracks. And as a siblings, all we can do is like walk hand in hand with our siblings to try and navigate those cracks as well. That's all we can really do.
Yeah. We live in a time, and I don't see it getting any better, where everything is so fast and it's all about social media. Who's going to upload the first movie, get the credit, whatever it is, and people less and less seeming to become less human and less humane, not wanting to be involved in the other person's business, and so that sort of reduces or almost to the point of removing the empathy that we should have or we should show to other people, to the mankind. The humanity is gone out of the human, so to speak. And I can well imagine, that's also being a parent, that these are the realities right now. That's what we are. And for your generation and for you all, thinking, what can you do collectively as either siblings, as a community? What, beyond people being nicer and being kinder, what else would you kind of like to see happen? I know I've heard the other one saying, oh, have laws, have all sorts of things, but what concrete moves can be made to, just make you guys feel a little bit more comfortable, if at all?
I think it boils down also just to like advocating in your own circles. Perfect example, like even during this this one podcast, I've had multiple of my friends stop in at least to see what was going on and listen in for a little bit. I think even though it's those small steps, little by little, like people start to learn more about like the issues that these people are facing. And that's the only way that like people are gonna somehow like get kind of to that, more grandiose goal of being
Hmm.
kinder to each other on the whole. I think it's just like spreading advocacy in your own like personal circle to the best of your ability. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, not everyone will be receptive to that, but at least if you give them the information, that there's a chance that they will be, and they'll use that information, if not to help your own family member, to help somebody else's family member, and that's all we really hope for.
Yeah. Well, yes, good. Thank you. And that's where I say, when we have these lives, invite your friends, because that's one way, like you said, of them knowing, and advocacy, creating the awareness. So when we're done, I'm going to put like the bullet points in, and then send you the link, both for YouTube and all of that. And then we just keep sharing and sharing. So just beyond enabling siblings to understand and broaden their perspective and really understand, because autism is something that hasn't really been understood by Everyone,
Yeah.
even in research studies, for us service providers as parents, is a whole lot to chew and break down. So the more we send these things out, and in fact, like you said, invite people into our space, hopefully the sooner the better we will become at letting them understand us. And I say us because I'm part of it. And what I
Yeah.
tell people is that if you're feeling unwell and you go into the doctor's office, for instance, the doctor isn't going to start administering any sort of test or prescribing medications without you first explaining or telling them why you're there. So I like to say the same for our community, that the more we tell people, the more we tell them the different things to expect, hopefully the sooner the better they will be equipped to be accepting of us.
Agree.
So on that note, and if you don't have anything else to say, do you? Okay, I would like to thank you for your time.
Thank you for
Uh,
having me. I appreciate it.
yeah. Thank you so much. Okay, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you,
All right.
Nancy. I'll talk to you later, okay?
Bye.
Bye.
All right.